Hello there, and this is chapter 9, and it's called Population, Poverty, and Economic Growth. So, looking at all three of these things and how they are tied in together, and they most certainly are tied in together. Now, here's a lovely picture of children that I grabbed from the internet. And the picture that is in the fifth edition, I was not included in the PowerPoint slide package, so I had to go searching around for some pictures on my own. And I think this is a pretty good one, racially and ethnically diverse, and actually dates from, I believe, the 1920s. So, so this chapter has these three things in it, um, and certainly economic growth and population have a lot to do with each other. Economic population growth rates in developing countries march upward, and those in developed countries decline. Economic growth behind development can be seen as a panacea for population problems, but economic growth is a double-edged sword. It can eradicate poverty, but it can also assault biodiversity with equal force. So it can have a harmful effect upon the environment. Um, we'll find in this chapter that a person named Simon Kuznets, it was a very, very famous economist, found that as income per capita grew, income inequality first increased, and then increased. Excuse me, and then decreased. And we have seen that pollution has observed the same increasing and decreasing pattern. We'll also learn a little bit about Thomas Malthus and his theory about population and reproduction and food production. And we'll also get into a little bit about effects of income growth and some reasons for optimism about economic growth with regard to the environment. I think there's going to be some discussion about municipal solid waste as well, and the relationship of that to the population and to income growth. Okay, so Thomas Malthus. And the dismal science kind of comes from Thomas Malthus. Um, he was a um, he was an economist and and I think a minister, and he wrote in 1798 his essay on the principle of population. Um, he to quote him from the book, "It is an obvious truth which has been taken notice by many writers that population must always be kept down to the level of the means of subsistence." um, Goodness. So that kind of means that if we just keep everybody at subsistence level, our planet can feed the population. But if not, we are kind of screwed. Now, the crux of Malthus' argument was that the insatiable human appetites for sex and food would lead to a disaster of resource adequacy. And And he also argued that unchecked human reproduction would increase populations geometrically, causing them to double every so many years, while food supplies could only increase arithmetically. And here's the bullet point for that. Would increase arithmetically. Now your book in the second paragraph here really states it out. I've never really seen it mapped out, written quite in this way. So he noted that in the United States, where resources were not a binding constraint, the population reportedly doubled every 25 years. As for food, Malthus reasoned that nowhere on Earth could food supplies double every 25 years, and at best they can grow by the amount of the 1798 food supply every 25 years. So starting with a food supply that would feed the 7 million people in his home in England, he felt the best case scenario was that there would be enough food for 14 million in 25 years, 21 million in 50 years, 28 million in 75 years, and so forth. At the same time, the population would double, and during those periods there would be 14, 28, and 56 million people in 25, 50, and 75 years. So the figure that you see here is the dreary and dismal conclusion. Population outstrips the food supply that can be fed. We are screwed. And this is the Malthusian population trap, in which the subsistence level of food per capita limits the population. But Malthus' point makes a lot of sense. However, technology has postponed the dismal outcome of Thomas Malthus's predictions. We had the agricultural revolution and farming advances in the 19th and late 18th century, and the green revolution of chemical and technological advances that brought hybrid grains, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. So these changes in food production made food production that much more better, and it took fewer people to feed a large population of individuals. So we were able to postpone Malthus's very, very dreary conclusion. So the food capacity did not necessarily have to grow arithmetically. It too could grow geometrically, and maybe even more so. But though there are constraints. Global climate change, drought, and environmental toxicity could hinder food supplies, and so this could be the constraint while population goes and becomes relatively unchecked. And here is a not so nice picture of a dense population in India. It could be any city in India, and this just kind of shows the impact on population, and you can see the tremendous municipal solid waste that is there as well. And your author makes some comments about colonizing the moon and obtaining needed resources from outer space, but if prudent policymakers will respond with caution to gloomy and glowing pictures alike. And the basic point is we're here on Earth, and we need to deal with what is known as opposed to looking forth at the sky. Although that doesn't stop some individuals from doing so, most notably Elon Musk, he of Tesla fame. Okay, next section is called the economics of population growth. So there'll be a few figures on that from our book here. And this shows 4 general stages of population growth throughout time. And this is a general schematic. On the vertical axis, we have births and deaths per 1,000 people. And on the horizontal axis, we have time. Now, there is a check on population, and it's dependent upon the opportunity costs for women. This for population, this is a key. Women give birth, and it's their choice that is going to increase the population or level it off, or perhaps decrease it. Now, when we say opportunity costs, these are choices that women have. And the theory goes, by the way, this is definitely the purview of microeconomic analysis, since this is individual decision makers. If women gain access to better educational opportunities and higher wages, the opportunity cost of their time spent raising children increases. But conversely, if women do not have these opportunities, then the benefits of having children outweigh the costs of having children in terms of lost opportunities to do something else. Okay, so we have stage 1. Stage 1: high birth rates and death rates. This is early in the development process. Scarce shortage of educational opportunities, jobs, and family planning resources keeps birth rates high, and poverty, unsanitary conditions, and the like keeps high death rates as well. One might think that third, perhaps even fourth world countries would be somewhat like this. Stage 2, we still have high birth rates, but we're beginning to have declining death rates. So there's improvements in public health services, better nutrition, safer living conditions that will increase life expectancy and decrease death rates. But these changes are not immediately accompanied by a change in birth rates. Stage 3, we have low death rates and declining birth rates. This, according to this theory, is where Western Europe has moved towards, wherein we have a declining birth rate. There's a higher opportunity cost to having children, and also a little bit of a leveling off and still declining or low death rates because people are generally living longer because of increased health and sanitary conditions. Now, finally, stage 4, we have low birth and low death rates. So after both birth and death rates have fallen, the nation's experienced relatively low population rates again. In essence, they're kind of sort of starting from scratch. Your book doesn't say what countries are at stage 4 yet. I think they're assuming that third world countries might be at stages 1, perhaps 2, and Western Europe would be at stage 3. Perhaps some Western European countries might be at stage 4 with a leveling off of the birth rate and certainly a leveling off of the death rate. Okay, and this is a model, a two-period model, I guess, with 2 persons at the beginning, and it's called growth and total fertility. And this is a simplified model of 2 people in which people are either young or old. And the assumption, there's certainly an assumption here, that after each period, the young are able to reproduce, the young become old, and the old die. Oh my goodness, what a dreary outcome. But this is designed to not necessarily show happiness in the stages of life, but this is just to show increases in population given different fertility rates. So when we have a fertility rate of 0, that is no reproduction at all. The old the old beget let's see, in period 2, those who are old in period 1 die, and those who are young in period 2 become old, and there are no new young people. So there is the population will not necessarily even out. It will just pretty much die out almost. Now, a total fertility rate of 2 allows the young generation to exactly replace the old. So now we have a complete 1-to-1 replacement. So the old become young. The young reproduce themselves, become old, reproduce themselves, become old and young, and so there's an exact matching. The young generation exactly replaces itself before turning old. There are 2 new young people to replace 2 people who are old. Finally, a total fertility rate of 4 means that each young pair is replaced by 2 young pairs in the next period. So in period 1 to period 2, the young pair in period 1 replaces itself by 2 young pairs, and then those young pairs beget another group of another 2. So the population kind of goes up by a factor 2, 4, 8 by a factor of 2 each time. So there is a definite increase in the population when you have a total fertility rate of 4. So that fertility rate really does matter. Okay, and what also matters is the age distribution for population growth. Now here we have Canada and Uganda. They each have about 33 million citizens. Um, because Canada's population is concentrated at non-childbearing ages, and most of Uganda's population is of childbearing age, the growth rate in Canada is under 1%, actually lower without immigration, and 3.6% in Uganda. So even though the population is the same, where the population is means a lot in terms of reproduction. And we have Uganda. I mean Uganda. This is Guatemala, and in Guatemala, it's the most populous country in Central America. And among indigenous families there, the total fertility rate is 6.2. So that means that each family is having not just um, two pairs, but three pairs. Oh my God, 6 kids. Woo! Um, and several factors contribute to the rapid population growth in Guatemala. The median age is 20. Women of childbearing age. Um, there are opportunities for children to contribute later, labor, and there are limited opportunities for education and employment for women. That lowers the opportunity cost of having children early in life. And not coincidentally, many people from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador are precisely the folks who are moving up and trying to get to our trying to immigrate into the United States. Same thing is happening in Europe. Many of the Middle Eastern countries have very high population and fertility rates with respect to Western Europe, which is both a good thing and a bad thing for the receiving country. You get increased labor, and you get a contribution to Social Security payments. The old are financing the retirement benefits of the older population, but there's also infrastructure issues and problems with that much of an increase in population. Okay, so this slide here shows us exponential wealth in the world population. Has produced a growth diagram in the shape of a J. And this is expected to level off at an S at a population around 10 billion people. I think we have somewhere close to 7 or 8 billion now. There are certainly efforts to decrease the population, which primarily focuses on birth control and increase opportunities for women. But in some of the low population countries, I'm thinking of Japan, perhaps Italy, there is a desire to, on the part of some politicians, to increase the population, to increase the native born population. I see this especially in the case of Japan. Um, and this is an interesting thing here about India in 2009. Efforts in India included expanded energy availability so that young adults might stay up watching television rather than engaging in sex. I'm reading this directly from the book. In '79, China began a one-child per couple policy that imposed fines and on as much as half of a couple's income um, on having more than one birth. But this went until about 2015, um, and it was generally stopped, and the people didn't. There were some very interesting unintended consequences. One of them being far too many boys born with respect to girls, and definite desire to have more men relative to women, but the gender ratio was very much skewed towards boys relative to girls. All right, Good. This ends this section of Chapter 9, Population, Poverty, and Economic Growth.